Let us begin the afternoon part of our conference. Just a couple of reminders. Are all of you using the application, right? You have found the application. It is really useful. Helps us save paperwork. Please do use that. There's another thing I need to warn you about, actually. It's the digital health test. Have you recently taken any health tests and digital health tests? We're going to help you about that. It might come as a shock to you in the end, what the results are. But so the idea is, as you log on to the Wi-Fi network, and if you haven't done that, I mean, please do try that out. So you provide your email address, and what the STRATCOM analysts are going to do, they're going to gather all the publicly available personal data that can be gathered just on the basis of your email address. And in an anonymized survey kind of way, the results will be provided by Yanis there. He's laughing already. Will be provided by Yanis at the end of the conference. So it is a bit scary. I mean, we have promised that the overview is going to be deleted after the conference, and so the results will be anonymized. So you're pretty safe. We don't want to embarrass anyone publicly, but so you might not come back next year. But in anyways, please do test your digital health. It is useful. I admit it's a bit scary, but you need to do that. All right, and another thing, I did see actually quite a lot of people playing the game, the news hero, the fighting the fake news kind of stuff. All right, anyone try that out? Anyone here? No? No one wants to admit that you play video games? All right. But I did see quite a bunch of people, maybe they're there. Maybe it creates addiction, that people do not come back for the conference anymore. In any case, that is also a good feature that you might want to use. That's in the lounge area over there. Okay, let me now introduce our next speaker, Tajan Ildam. He is NATO Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy, an ambassador as well. Sir, please, the floor is yours.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants of this important gathering, I'm so happy to be in Riga, once again attending the Strategic Communications Dialogue. This is my second time. I missed the first one, and I could see how the interest and the number of participants are growing. I was told 700 participants from 42 countries. It's impressive. And also the rich discussion that we are having. As I stand before you today, 2,500 troops from 8 allied nations are exercising together in Latvia as part of exercise Summer Shields. More than 30,000 allied troops, including ships, aircrafts, and armor, are also training off the Baltic coast and on Baltic soil. Exercises Cyber Strike, Baltops, Thunderstorm, what we in NATO jargon call the spring cluster of exercises. All these servicemen and women are telling the story of the alliance, that of 29 nations who have chosen to be part of the NATO family, united for the defense of their freedom and security. What they do is essential to deter any potential adversary from attacking our populations and territories. What they do sends the most powerful message of strength, capability, and solidarity. What those servicemen and women do supports NATO's strategic political priorities to enhance its deterrence and defense posture. What they do is also critical to the way we communicate in the 21st century, a world where visuals rule and news spreads in real time, a world where what you are seen or shown to be doing will account for what you say. We need to make sure that their story is present in the information space, to be available and accessible by our home audiences as much as by our potential adversaries. It has to be understood, recognized and valued as the NATO story in order to maintain our credibility. In the next few weeks, on 11th and 12th of July, NATO heads of state and government will meet in Brussels and write another chapter of NATO's narrative. 2 years after the landmark 2016 Warsaw Summit, they will set NATO's political agenda for the months and years to come. Their decisions will guide our communication strategy and priorities. So let me take a few minutes to go through the main areas of focus for the upcoming Brussels summit. The summit will build on decisions made at the Warsaw Summit in the fields of deterrence and defense, projecting stability and fighting terrorism, modernizing the alliance, NATO-EU cooperation, and burden sharing, enhancing our ability to move forces into and from Europe without delay will be at the heart of summit discussions and decisions. We expect allied leaders to decide on a NATO readiness initiative to reinforce our maritime posture and to confirm the establishment of 2 new NATO force structure headquarters, critical for reinforcement. Military mobility, ensuring we have the right forces in the right place at the right time, is also a key area of cooperation between NATO and the European Union. This cooperation is stronger than ever before. At the Brussels summit, this cooperation will be taken further and beyond the 74 joint measures which we are currently implementing, notably in the fields of cyber defense, hybrid threats, and fighting terrorism. Investing in defense is an essential condition for improving our forces, developing the high-end capabilities, and demonstrating solidarity through contributions to operations and activities. In 2017, 25 allies spent more on defense and they did in 2016. And in 2018, we expect that 8 allies will meet the 2% guideline. This is encouraging news. The trend has to continue. To do so, our national governments need public support. For allied citizens to support defense spending and through it for the alliance, they need to understand the benefits that these investments bring to their individual freedom and security. And they need to recognize themselves in the alliance and the values it stands for. The news is unfortunately not so encouraging. Our 2017 survey of the allied people shows that understanding of NATO is decreasing, particularly in those countries where NATO is less visible. Young people in particular don't know us and are opting out. Reaching them early enough is our primary challenge, and we will need to come closer to our audiences in a way that resonates with them, tapping into what matters most to them. This is no easy task, but it is a task that we ought to embrace. Otherwise, others, not the best intentioned ones, will tell our story for us and will shape what our people think about us, what we do and why we do it. This is the rule of today's highly competitive and contested information environment. These learnings are today driving NATO's communications approach. Last year, I took part in the Politics of Strategic Communications panel and laid out the principles of this new approach. Since 2016, we have been following the UK government's OASIS campaign planning and evaluation template. Alex Aiken, who was moderating the panel this morning, is part of our teamwork, and I have to recognize his personal contributions and express my gratitude. Our communications are now audience-driven and objectives-based. They are increasingly the subject of evaluation so that we are able to adjust our approach towards maximum effect. And our communications have been fully integrated into NATO's policy-making process in a mutually reinforcing way. 2 years later, this campaign approach has helped us to better understand our audiences, establish clear and smart communications objectives based on what our audiences think and feel, tailor our communications activities, products and messages to the audiences we want to reach, increase coordination both internally and with our external partners, and reinforce our planning and evaluation. We have also launched our first communications campaign on defense and security, which you may know as the We Are NATO campaign. Today, 5 countries are running the We Are NATO campaign, and a few others have expressed interest in launching their national campaigns in 2018. This campaign is designed for our home audiences. Its objective is to reduce the awareness gap that we are faced with and work to increase over time public support for NATO. In today's contested information environment, we need to make sure that we remain the master of our own narrative across the information space. This can only be done through a well-calibrated, deliberate and proactive approach. We want to convey NATO's resolve, readiness and capability to defend its populations and territory against any threat from any direction, while reaffirming our commitment to dialogue and the peaceful diplomatic resolution of crisis. To do so, we need to increase our understanding of adversarial narratives. This is part of a broader effort, the Information Environment Assessment, as we call it IEA, and this effort builds on different strands of work. First, we are continuously reviewing and refining the assessment methodology and process that we have developed to our enhanced forward presence. Information environment assessment is made of 3 primary components. Our own communications assessment, what do we do and or say, how well we perform, why. Second, hostile narrative assessment, what does the adversary do and or say, how we look at what triggers them and who the intended target audience might be. And we look at the channels and the tools that are being used against us and analyze patterns of tactics, techniques, and procedures. Traditional media and social media analysis, what do others do and or say. This helps us set our communications objectives and performance in a broader context, in full cognizance that other external stories may win over our intentions and steal public attention away from us. Our reports conclude with actionable insights and recommendations and how we can calibrate our communications efforts. NATO is also exploring how to innovate the technical side of an information environment assessment capability. Currently, much of our analysis is done by humans who gather and process the data manually. We are keen to learn to what extent machines can be programmed to acquire data for us, so that we can dedicate more time to making sense of the data and what it means for our communications. Acquiring an information environment assessment capability is a NATO flagship project, and we are working closely with our military colleagues to bringing this endeavor to fruition. For some time now, and this is well known by some of the industry players in the room, NATO has put significant efforts into working with industry advisors on the challenge of delivering an information environment assessment capability during the next 12 to 18 months. The eventual solution will harness the latest technology. Technology can support, yet staffing and training processes across a wide geographical dispersed organization like NATO will be an ongoing challenge. There is no machine that currently exists that can provide all the answers we want. So we must design effective processes that can support the technology, the humans who use it, and the decision makers who receive recommended insights to act upon. The next 12 to 18 months promises to be the most groundbreaking era in NATO's communications to date. Understanding the information environment means understanding our audiences and means understanding how NATO, as protector of freedom and security, can continue to pursue its aims and secure its existence. Most important of all, we need to make sure that NATO's narrative, the good story, with all of our values that 29 allied nations share, prominently features in the information space. Of course, in confronting the challenges of disinformation and propaganda, we need to debunk some of the myths. But more important than that is to have our narrative prominently exist in the information space, so that what is right, what is the truth, and what is fake could be distinguished by our audiences and other audiences. I would like to extend to all of you my best wishes in a very successful deliberation of this dialogue. And once again, Yanis, my compliments to you for this successful event, and many more to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador, for this input from the NATO headquarters. Now we will be beginning a session that I mostly look forward to, actually, because it deals with the question of influence on elections, and obviously in our countries, elections are coming every year in one or another country. So, as we have recently found out, that is a particularly poignant issue nowadays. So that is going to be the topic of our next panel. So what I will do is invite the members of the panel. Professor Mercier, please, if you could join us here on the stage. Mr. Carlos Malamud, yes, please. And Mr. Mick Maran, please, if you could join us here as well. And the moderator, Bob Posner, please. Bob is Director of Political Finance and Regulation and Legal Counsel of the UK Electoral Commission. Bob, good luck to you.
Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. So welcome. This is Twisting the Poll, How to Influence Elections. I'm not sure about the how-to bit, but we'll talk about elections. And it's really nice to be asked to moderate this session. It's just incredibly topical, isn't it? What I can say is we're not going to give you, I don't think we are, slides on brains and syringes and people being tortured like we had this morning, or various advertising techniques and tricks of the trade. I hope the session, I think it will be, it's our aim, will be much more practical, much more set in the reality of elections that have happened recently, some case studies, and really what it's felt like in the sense of the hard reality of political campaigning, which isn't always nice, if I can put it that way. There's a lot at stake in political campaigning. There is the prize of getting into power, and that's a big prize. And part of the debate, isn't it, is how one has rules that actually keeps a balance, that people follow the rules. So to state the obvious, elections are a, if not the vital element of a democratic system. However, I just want to say, as I have the platform here, let's not forget that campaigning is a good thing. It's a key thing. And there is a balance between free and fair elections with principles of journalistic freedom and free speech, but at the same time ensuring appropriate rules and restrictions through robust regulation so that the values of freedom are not exploited. And that is, I suggest, the challenge. You're going to be hearing some presentations from three experts to my left on the subject, and they're going to focus on certain case studies in certain countries and the impact of what happened in those elections, or what may happen, thinking forward, and what could be done to protect against hostile objectives or abuses of democracy. Because it did occur to me, looking at the topic, that we could have invited a speaker from the Kremlin. Don't suppose we did. And I wonder what they would have said. I've got a few minutes. The organiser of the conference said that I could just speak maybe for 5 or 10 minutes about the UK perspective, just to give you another topical case area. So I'll do that. I'm very mindful in talking about UK perspective, just to say, because there's quite senior UK people in the audience, this is my perspective from my corner of elections world in the UK. So it's what I see in my role as Director of Regulation and the responsibilities that brings at the UK Electoral Commission. And the thing that strikes me is that if your starting point is that in any nation, elections should be a celebration of democracy, and in the UK context, elections have felt very stable for a long time. We've had issues, but it's felt very right and very appropriate. What is different at the moment is that for me and my team, we have a significant number of major investigations on our books and inquiries. Part of those focus on the recent general election 2017, but many more focus on the referendum into the UK staying or leaving the EU in 2016. So that's 2 years on now from that referendum. There's already been findings that we've made, I've made, that criminal offences have been committed by campaigners, and that relates to the campaign funding and spending rules, and that's a serious matter on any definition. And only last week, we opened a new major investigation into a major campaigner at that referendum, and that investigation arose from information we learnt from the previous investigations into others. So it does seem different, I suggest, and it does seem of concern. And I don't, from that, make any leap at all to the legitimacy of the result or not, and how voters actually chose to vote in that referendum, but it does feel different. And issues around the influences on and the efficacy of digital campaigning techniques used in the UK in 2006 in the referendum do seem increasingly concerning. And the Electoral Commission's organisation, myself, gave evidence just a few weeks ago to the UK Parliament, to the committee looking into fake news, the inquiries into fake news there. In a few weeks' time, we give evidence to the European Parliament on the same topic. And I find myself talking to my counterparts in a number of other countries about their issues. I find myself talking to security services, both in the UK and elsewhere, and links talking into USA in particular. That doesn't seem normal to me. That seems very different to when I started my job 4 years ago in this current role. So there's certainly been a change of some sort, and it might just be a phase, but it does feel different. The UK Prime Minister, Theresa May, just a few months ago, earlier this year, quote, said the Russians are seeking to weaponize information. UK security services a few weeks after that have said hostile nation states, that's in the plural, are seeking to undermine democracy and cause disruption in the West, but not limited to elections. I think that's quite key, not just limited to elections. It's a fair statement. It's one the UK government have made recently, and it's one I share, when they talk about that in the UK that we've not been made aware of attempts to interfere with elections or referendum on the scale similar to that which apparently seems to have happened in the US, France or Germany, or at least not successful attempts. But at the same time, I'd be very cautious, as others would be, on resting on that statement, because evidence continues to emerge all the time as people look into matters. And there is now clearly quite a lot of research and evidence of Russian bot factories focused on that referendum and on the recent general election in the UK, although the extent of that and the impact is not clear. And there are real questions to answer about the impacts of social media and how that makes it arguably more difficult to detect malicious activity and how we prevent that. And we'll hear something about that. So in the UK the Electoral Commission, my body, we're looking at whether the rules on the funding of campaign activity have been followed. And in that sense, we follow the money. We're a financial regulator. We're a national organisation. Our role ends at the UK borders by definition. We're enforcing UK law. So we aren't, as an organisation, in any position to answer wider questions of Russian interference or any other interference, or questions about the regulation of the internet, which are much wider issues. But we do want to shine a light on anything we find that may be breaching the rules. So how we tackle the activities of overseas entities in social media is a challenge we all face, I'm sure. It cuts across a number of issues, not just elections. It cuts across incitements to acts of terror, child sexual abuse, and many other topics around regulating the internet, which is a hard thing to do and which is really only actively being looked at in a real way now. So as an organisation, a nation-based organisation, we're very supportive of working with others, nationally, internationally, to solve these problems. But it's beyond the remit, I suggest, of any one organisation. Nevertheless, in the UK, recommendations are already emerging, including from my organisation, about how to improve the law, and there's a panel after this session focusing on that. But to give you a flavour of that, one of the things that we've said as UK Electoral Commission that we want to happen in UK law is transparency of online campaigning, who is placing it, who is the source of it, and effectively so that voters can know, and know in real time, not a year or 2 years after an event, what this material is, so they can judge it for themselves. And we see transparency as it's only one key aspect of improving confidence in these times. So I'm going to turn to the panel. We have 3 speakers. We're badged as experts, but you're all experts as well. Actually, this is me influencing from this morning, isn't it? We're all on one team. So each speaker will have about a quarter of an hour, 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour to speak on the topic they want to speak on. I'm just going to throw out 3 issues or questions that I invited the speakers to think about in preparing their talks, and I invite you to think about as we go through this session. And we will have a question and answer session as this morning after the presentations. The 3 things I had in mind are what has actually changed from the previously accepted rulebook on influencing voters' elections. Has anything truly changed? And if it has, what is it that's making us all concerned? Who judges what is legitimate campaigning? It's an easy thing to say we need more rules and more laws, but who actually judges what's legitimate as opposed to misinformation or fake news? Government, courts, or the voter? And how should nation-based legislators, governments, regulators respond in a proportionate way so that actually they're not themselves harming freedom of speech and democracy? So I'm going to hand over. Mick Moran is our first speaker. Mick is Director General of the Estonian Foreign Office. He's well placed on the topic he's going to speak on, which is looking at Russian influences on Western electoral processes. Thank you, Mick.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks. Is it working? Yeah, and thanks for the promotion. Foreign Office is ahead of me. Right now I'm leading the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service. but very closely working with the Foreign Office as well. And thanks, Yanis, for leading this great institution, and thanks for getting this small group of people together here. It's always great to be in Latvia. And I also appreciate today a bit cloudier weather, because it's much more for spying than this terrible sunshine and brightness that has cursed the Baltic nations for the last 5 weeks. So thanks for that. Well, you might ask, what is an Intel chief doing in a conference that is dedicated to strategic communication? Actually, the answer is very easy, because I think that the relationship between strategic communication and intelligence is very important. Because when you want to pass a message as a strategic communicator, you need to know more that is in the newspapers, you need to know more that is on social media. Basically, you need to collect, you need to analyze, you need to structure that information, and you need to verify that information. Basically, you need intelligence. Of course, on top of your usual common sense. So I will try to give you our service's view on Russia's influences in elections. But before I do that, just to inform you that the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service has focused on Russia for the last 25 years, and seems that the focus will stay on Russia, and I always say that the focus will change when Russia will become a fully democratic and friendly nation. So most probably I will keep my job for a few more years. But just to give the perspective how we see Russia in this region, I'm sure that my Baltic services will agree with me, but we think in a Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service that Russia is the only potential security threat in the Baltic Sea region and on NATO's eastern border. Well, I think that over the last years, over the last 25 years, we have acquired pretty good knowledge about Russia, pretty good knowledge about Russia's operations. And you might know that we have been publishing the public threat assessment for the last 3 years. It is available on our website, efis.ee, and tomorrow morning it will be also available somewhere in the building, so you have to spy around and see where it is. But we have been doing that in order to raise the awareness and to share a bit of our knowledge with the outsider audience. And I think it was a year ago when we also got a very good feedback from Kremlin media. They said that in these reports, public reports, Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service knows the Kremlin's plans even before the Kremlin does. Wow! Well, you cannot have better compliment for Intel service that is focusing on Russia. And right now we have a discussion whether to make it an unofficial slogan of the service or not. But it was very good to hear that kind of feedback. Well, now coming to the point, the elections. I think that the Kremlin's meddling in the Western elections has been quite extensively covered during the last 2 or so years. And one might think that maybe as Russia's activities are exposed, it will deter Russia and they will not do it again. I will assure you that it has not deterred Russia. They will do it again. And we will see more of it. But before I go into the real matter, I will take a step back for a moment and look at how we have come so far. How has Russia, a country that's having a declining economy, its declining economical power, been able to influence internal politics in democratic countries? And over the last years, I think that the international community has been focusing on Russia and how Russia has used the different social media tools, be it bots on Twitter or bots on Facebook or ads on Facebook. And I think that exposing those activities in social media is really, really important. However, according to our assessment, this is not the core. This is not the core of Kremlin's influence strategy. I think the core of Kremlin's influence strategy is to influence elections before the elections actually take place. This is the best possible solution, to influence elections before elections, to influence humans that are actually, at the end of the day, doing the final decision. So I think that it's not just about twisting the polls, but it's about influencing the politics in general. And we see that during the last years, and even way back, Russia has focused on creating network of, I would say, influence agents. And when you ask me for a definition for influence agents, I would call an influence agent a person who can use his or her status or access to influence the decision-making in Europe, in the United States, in other countries, and who are directed to do it by Russia. We have detected that especially in Europe, the Putin's regime has developed quite an extensive network of politicians, quite an extensive network of journalists, also academics and diplomats who are acting in Kremlin's interests. And we have seen how the Kremlin has put a great deal of effort to create this network of pro-Russian politicians in the European Union. And Russia has invested quite widely. They have focused on old faces, on new faces. They have been investing into people from the far right and to the far left. They have been focusing and investing into people in the EU level, as well as into the representatives of local governments and national governments and regional leadership bodies. And what Kremlin is offering, actually they are not offering to these people anything really special. They are offering what usual human beings / politicians usually want. Basically, they want attention. So Russia provides these politicians media coverage, and especially extensive media coverage in Russia's state-owned media outlets. They offer exclusive business accesses, be it in Russia or in Crimea. They offer high-level meetings with Russian businessmen, with Russian politicians that can again be used in media coverage, and that can be used then again in their countries of origin. And last but not least, Russia has also been providing financial support. Well, I would say also that not all the investments that Russia has made or the Kremlin has made during the last years have been paying off really well. I think that they have had some really bad investments, but at the same time, I think that Russia has had really good investments. So, for example, politicians who a few years ago acted on the margins of their domestic politics have now become part of mainstream. In some countries, those people are part of their parliaments, even governments. We see how these people are now promoting Russia's interests, either by calling for an improvement in relations with Russia or calling for ending sanctions on Russia. And these people are the critical enablers of information operations, helping to spread disinformation propaganda. And I already predict that you might want to hear some good examples, because always when an Intel guy is speaking, he's saying about grand things, but not bringing in any examples. This time, since it's a very small crowd of people and a trusted network of friends, I will bring you two examples. I will not name any names, but I have two examples for you. So first example is a parliament member of a European country who a few years ago visited Russian-occupied Crimea on a trip paid by Kremlin. Soon after the trip to Crimea, the politician lobbied actively for lifting the sanctions on Russia. The politician later asked the Kremlin for financial and media support for elections campaigning. In exchange, the politician promised to take European opinion leaders to Crimea, and the politician is an active distributor of Kremlin's narratives today. Second example, another politician in another country is promoting business relations with Russia. The politician has organized several delegations of politicians and business people to Russian-occupied Crimea, where they have been promised very exclusive business opportunities in Russia. And this politician is actively working towards lifting the sanctions on Russia. But I have to stress that these are only some examples, only two examples from a wider picture that we are detecting every day. And I would like to stress that Russia is playing a longer game. So they are constantly spotting talent, be it from the marginal political parties or from the youth conferences that are currently organized by Russia's embassies around the world. So with a network of influence agents in place, the Kremlin is able to influence everyday politics in Europe. And I think that when they have this well-established network in place, they do not actually need to interfere in the election process itself. So finally, what can we do about it? So trying to answer, Bob, your questions that you posed us in the beginning of this panel. I have 4 solutions for you. First of all, stop it, expose it, to raise awareness, and fourthly, we should cooperate more. So just adding one sentence to each of those solutions. So first of all, I think that Western governments have the tools to be used in order to stop Russian activities. I think that the Western communities, the Western governments should be stronger, bolder when using the possibilities they have in hand. And I think that we should not be too much thinking about maybe we are provoking Russia too much. I think that's a very common idea in European capitals. Maybe we do a bit too much. And I would like to draw your attention to the report that was written by SIPA a few weeks ago by Peter Doran and Don Jensen. And they definitely said that we should not prioritize Putin's peace of mind. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. So secondly, to expose the activities. I think that when the activities or the influence agents are exposed, it's really difficult to operate covertly from that point on. Thirdly, we have to raise the public awareness. I think that's the point where we intelligence people and you communications people should do more. I think we have done our bit, me being in this conference, us in the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service issuing the public threat assessment. This is part of the raising of awareness. But I think that having articles in newspapers, having interviews, having the spotlight on the activities that Russians are doing is a great way to hinder their operations. And fourthly, cooperate. I think that European and Western intelligence services should do more. I think that we have to share information more quickly because probably what is happening right now in some other part of Europe might happen in my country. What is happening in my country can in few months happen in Latvia or some other country in Europe or in the United States. So sharing that information and discussing what to do about it is the key subjects. So in case you slept during my very short intervention, to sum it up, Kremlin wants the West to be weak and divided. The Kremlin will keep on disrupting the West, and it's now our choice whether we let Kremlin succeed or we act in our defense. And I would definitely support the latter. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, that was really fascinating. I'm going to move us on now. We have Arnaud Mercier, Professor of Communication at the Institut Français de Presse, and who's going to look at French elections.
Yes. Okay, it's okay. Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation, and sorry for my English. You will see quickly that it's not perfect, but never mind. So I was asked to speak about how to destabilize the candidate Macron through social media during the electoral French campaign. For the beginning, I want to say that social media are used now by many citizens and activists in order to make fun of political staff and of the media. And so beyond ideological criticism of the candidates' programs, mockery is omnipresent on social media. And it affects everyone, from the extreme left to the extreme right, because these attacks are the sign of a deep distrust vis-à-vis the entire political staff in France, and not only in France. But in France, this practice is very widespread, especially as it corresponds to a very old cultural background. Cultural background with the cartoons of the press, of which Charlie Hebdo is the heir, the political chansonnier also, or the political puppets on TV. So it's very important to have this on mind, because I can say that there is a true culture of democracy now on social media, not democracy, but democracy, and a lot of people express this distrust against all the politicians with humor and with irony. So I give you some example to illustrate that fact, and I want to precise immediately that I make a difference precisely between I make a difference between those examples to mock candidates, every candidate, and the other operations with the aim to destabilize candidates. And we have the example of Emmanuel Macron. And to destabilize, it's not only humor, but it's also fake news, rumors, etc. So it's different, okay? I make a difference, and I think it's important to make a difference because I have heard of people that doing no difference between humor and fake news. So some example coming from France, parodic accounts. So it's a former sustain of Sarkozy. So the only time Sarkozy will bring down crime is when he will go to court. And of course, it's a transparent allusion to the various legal proceedings for the financing of his electoral campaigns. Another example, a lot of mockery are against pollsters, of course. So you can see that we have no trust on pollsters because they are totally blind. Okay. It's very important. Many internet users like to merge two faces to show the resemblance between the merged people. Here, as you can see, we have Putin and Marine Le Pen. Okay, we have here the parody of a famous election poster of François Mitterrand in 1981, the quiet force, and is the quiet fraud. Okay, another example, sorry, it's a mistake. Here is a netizen love a lot of Marine Le Pen, who completely missed a televised debate with Macron, resulting of 0 mark, for instance. Okay, all this kind of humor with image is very important on social media concerning now every election in France and in every country. So, what is the real problem with fake news and malicious rumors to destabilize a candidate? This is the case of Macron. we can see here that all shots are allowed, because here is the capture of a private conversation on 4chan between two anonymous persons who try to invent a rumor against Emmanuel Macron, saying that he has a sex affair with the wife's daughter, because they have the same age. The daughter of his wife has the same age of him, because you know there is a big difference between him and his wife. So they try to invent this kind of rumor. It was not the case, fortunately, but you have to be aware of the fact that they discuss and they test privately the kind of rumors. We have a lot of rumors during this election against Emmanuel Macron. He would wash his hand after shaking hands with workers, for instance, and he has an offshore account hidden to the tax office. He is for the restoration of Sharia, the Islamic law in the island of Mayotte. That is in the south of. Well, never mind. What are the mechanisms to spread this kind of rumor? We have an example. The beginning of a rumor is this tweet for a far-right activist that interpret abusively an article in the French famous media with the idea that he foments something. So he introduced the rumor. And after, we launched the offensive with an article on a not very famous underground media coming from the extreme right, okay, saying that Macron tried to invent a Macron tax for holders of apartment or houses. So it's totally fake, it's totally false, and he deleted since the first article, but the week after, with the famous tape of orchestration, well known for propaganda, a set of articles of different far-right websites, what we call in France fasciosphere, publish this information. And at the end, we have political recovery, since some well-known politicians refer not to the rumor, but quoting the media. Of course, media, it depends what we call media, but they present themselves as media, okay? And for instance, and they made this rumor an argument during the campaign. And here we have the example of the support page, Facebook pages to Nicolas Dupont-Aignan, okay? But and for instance, another example is the imitation of a known information site, Le Soir. Le Soir is famous in Belgium, and they created a false website page, not lesoir.be, but lesoir.info. Okay? So it's impossible to make the difference if you don't go to see the URL. Okay? So they use exactly the facial replica of the homepage of the Belgian site, intended to give a serious bond to false information. Okay? And in this case, it was the idea that Saudi Arabia funded the campaign of Emmanuel Macron, of course, and it allowed Marion Maréchal Le Pen, the niece of Marine Le Pen, to tweet a link to this article, okay? And tweet was deleted after, of course. When it was debunked, she said, "Oh, okay, it was a mistake. It was impossible to notice that it was a false." Okay, so it's always the same schema. Okay, but the most destabilizing operation comes on the evening of the TB debate, and 2 days later. while the channel Russia Today has announced for several weeks that WikiLeaks held documents compromising for the candidate Macron, it is only 4 days before the election that something was published, and the beginning was with the debate. During the debate, Marine Le Pen launches a treacherous remark, hoping that, I quote, "We were not going to learn soon that Mr. Macron had an offshore account in the Bahamas or I do not know where." Okay? And Macron, the answer of Macron is, be careful, because it's not legal what you are saying, so be careful of what you are doing. But these rumors, had not begun during the debate, because 2 hours before the debate, in 4chan, coming from United States of America, we discover this link to present the fact that we have the proof that Emmanuel Macron had an account hidden on Evil Island. I think, and they created the hashtag Macron cash to facilitate the popularization of the attack. But it was not success. It was not, sorry, a success. So the manipulation continued 2 days after with a new hashtag. And it was more popular in this case. It was Macron leaks. I think you have heard of it. Macron leaks. Macron leaks. And I think it's very important and very interesting to use leaks, because the false idea is the name. Leaks is when something is leaked by a whistleblower or something like this. But in this case, it was not a whistleblower. They stole some documents on the Macron's team, and by phishing the emails. So it's not a leak. It's a robbery. It's nothing more. So it begins with Jack Posobiec, who were very active. He was a pro-Trump activist during the US electoral campaign. And Jack Posobiec was also very, very active in France against Emmanuel Macron, because Emmanuel Macron was the candidate of open society, of European Union, and free market. Okay, so they launch these tweets, Macron leaks, correspondence document, photos coming from his team, to prove that he acted illegally, and his team also. So we have a lot of dissemination of this first tweet on the Jacob Sobiech sphere, of course. And it was very important because WikiLeaks complacently relays the rumor. And we can say that WikiLeaks quickly makes its contribution to this fake news, because he announced less than an hour after the pseudo-revelation coming from Jack Posobiec that he investigates. Okay, we investigate about the document. But the way to do it, it's not a way to say to people, okay, stop your mind, we will verify, and after you can have a good idea if it's real or not. In the way they do it, on the contrary, they permit some person to believe on the rumor and to believe on the fake news, in fact. So after that, you can see that WikiLeaks was very important to share the fake news, like Posobiec. And after, the same mechanism, right-wing sites continued the work of reporting this dirty information. And in this case, you could appreciate how they say, we are unable to verify authenticity, but it seemed to indicate that Emmanuel Macron, so they say exactly the contrary on the same words, okay? We are not sure of nothing, but it seems that, okay? So it's really the way they use this bad news. And after, Dreux, of course, delayed the article. Just one day after, they say, okay, it was a mistake, it was impossible to verify, but now we know that we have verified, so we delayed the article. But of course, they delayed too late. And for instance, the same mechanism, political recovery, here by the number two of the National Front, Florian Philippot. Will Macron learn things that investigative journalism deliberately ignore? It's always the same way. Distrust against media, okay? Scary this democracy thinking, okay? It's totally absurd because they are working for democratic thinking, okay? And to finish, I have to present the process of the manipulation of Macron leaks. Phishing members' emails of the team Macron, publication on social media of those emails and the documents associated to give the impression of authenticity, of course, and they add fake documents with those real documents in the mass of real documents. And after WikiLeaks and other partisan media publish only the more scandalous documents, okay? They forget, of course, the real documents, and after, politicians exploit those revelations. So, fake news example, coming from the documents of Macron leaks, we have a false list of generous donors for the campaign, and it is an anti-Semitic list, as you can see, of course. And, for instance, a false payslip for the Macron campaign manager, okay, saying that he earned a lot of money. And we have also this fake news. His team buys drug for Macron, okay? But in this case, what is interesting, it's a fake news. It's a fake news because the Macron team anticipate the fact that phishing would be possible. So they create false emails and saying that if there is some phishing, they will publish it and it will be easy for us to prove that it's not a real information, okay? It's a little bit... I'm not sure that it's a real solution for everybody, but we can try to do it, okay? And fortunately, a lot of journalists and internet citizens, je vais y arriver, publish analysis of the metadata. And very quickly. So we can, for instance, prove that the document that was presented as a proof of the creation of something, a firm by Macron, was false because with the uses of some software, it's very easy to prove that it was just a fabrication, a forgery. Okay, and as you can see here in blue. And to end, I was too long. The traces here of that lead to Russia. I said that for weeks ago, we can find easily some announcement of what will happen about fake news. For instance, on RT France, okay, saying that WikiLeaks finds something. What? We don't know exactly, but we will have the answer later. And we can find also traces of Russia to relay political accusation. Okay, so Emmanuel Macron is agent of lobbying for bank interest, of course. And we can find traces for sharing and dissemination of this false news, fake news, because we have a lot of false accounts that are linked to the troll factory coming from Russia and that use bots to promote fake news, and also traces to make fake misleading documents. Certain metadata permit to observe that Russian language is used when they forge the fake news. Okay, so it's a little bit strange why the Macron's team use Russian language on their metadata of their file. Okay, and at the end, another metadata is very interesting. It reveals that Georgy Petrovich is author of the data. Okay, so who is Georgy Petrovich? Is an employee of RIGA, in Russian, a big Russian computer security company whose links with the secret service of the country are undeniable, because we can find, and French media prove that Georgy Petrovich is very close to Russian services. Conclusion, lessons from the French presidential election. Since Emmanuel Macron was particularly targeted, this is the reason why he decided to vote a bill against fake news, and we're debating now, today, in the French Parliament of a future bill against fake news. But I have to say that it raises a lot of debate in France, okay, because of free speech, of course. Second conclusion, the far right is well connected with a laundering circuit of dirty information. I call it laundering circuit of dirty information, like dirty money, okay, laundering money, because as you can see, there is mechanism to go progressively from the grassroots activists to the official politician. Third, the Russia is clearly implicated on those operations. And four, accounts active on the American alt-right are connected with bots and false accounts sustained by Russian interest. So I asked the question, why there is so many connection between the alt-right in United States of America and Russia. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arno. Very full presentation. Thank you very much. Okay, so time is moving on very much now. Our next speaker, Carlos Malamud, is going to take us to Latin America, so something a bit different, a different perception on things, perhaps not so Russian-dominated. Carlos is Senior Analyst for Latin America at the Elcano Royal Institutes and Professor of Latin American History at UNED in Madrid, Spain. We're going to look at Mexican elections. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I will speak about the Mexican elections, and there is an evident concern about foreign interference in electoral process in Europe and the US. But we should also ask if the same happens in Latin America, and more specifically in Mexico. The question is appropriate in relation to the Latin American electoral cycle. 14 presidential elections will be held between October 2017 and December 2019. At this point, we could also ask if the US or the EU will be able to share with Mexico the lessons they've learned from their own electoral experience. On July the 1st, the Mexicans will elect a president, renew both chambers of Congress, change 9 of the 32 governors, and thousands of local authorities. But only 3 presidential candidates from 4 stand any real changes. First of all, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, known popularly as AMLO, standing with a leftist party of his own making, Morena, and running in coalition with an evangelical and far-right political party. Social encounter. Secondly, Ricardo Anaya, a right-wing candidate who represents a heterogeneous coalition led by the National Action Party, the PAN. And finally, José Antonio Meade, the candidate of the ruling Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI. AMLO is campaigning on an anti-establishment platform, although he has offered to respect macroeconomic equilibriums and said his social program will be financed mostly via a thorough revision of the existing spending structure. Last Friday, he made peace with the most prominent Mexican entrepreneurs who oppose him firmly. AMLO is now currently leading the polls. Survey average indicate 48% support, and he has increased his advantage by 20 points over Anaya's 28. Meade continues in third place at 20%. According to the Spanish daily El País, López Obrador has 92% chances of being elected. Considering the prospect of him winning, many are now wondering about his future government. Will it have a populist, almost Bolivarian character? Will it revert many of the reforms promoted by Peña Nieto, the current president? Or will the López Obrador of 2018 be very different from the candidate of 2006 and 2012? And finally, how could the Trump factor affect AMLO's reformist preferences? Before attempting to answer the question about Russian interference, I would like to make a point about Latin American election history, its democratic development, and how citizenship has been built up. Most of the continent gained its independence from Spain in the early 19th century and immediately adopted voting systems. Elections were the main mechanism for choosing authorities. Obviously, not all the people were enfranchised. Similarly to the US and a few European countries where part of the population had voting rights. Practically from the beginning, there were also complaints about election fraud, as in all the few countries where voting was part of the governing process. In the same way, from the very beginning, politicians frequently lied and manipulated the truth. The object of this comment highlights the fact that Latin America has a long electoral tradition. In Mexico, in the 1960s and 70s, elections were the norm instead of Latin America's military dictatorships. The country, however, had other problems. One of the consequences of the Mexican Revolution was a legacy of a hegemonic party system that remained in place for practically 70 years, which in its final phase was dominated by the PRI. This led Mario Vargas Llosa to define it as the perfect dictatorship. In 2000, a different period began with the election of Vicente Fox, the leader of the PAN. Some even referred to the commencement of a transition to democracy, something of an exaggerated expression, much like Vargas Llosa quip. To a large extent, the PRI's defeat was possible due to the existence of an efficient system of electoral control in the hands of the Federal Electoral Institute, the IFE, created in 1990 and responsible for federal electoral process. Within a short time, the IFE acquired a reputation for seriousness, and its work gave elections an image of transparency and efficient management that had been totally lacking until then. AMLO's defeat in 2012, under many allegations of fraud, led to some criticism of the IFE and to the creation of a new national authority following the 2014 constitutional reform. This was the National Electoral Institute, INE, whose prime object is to standardize the rules governing how federal and local electoral processes are organized and to guarantee a high level of democratic quality. The change from the IFE to the INE also involved changes in the fight against electoral delinquency. Thus, the Electoral Court is a body entrusted with judging certain electoral offenses and not the IFE as previously. The competencies of the jurisdictional and administrative authorities are now better defined, and the INE's work can therefore focus on organizing electoral process. In any case, confidence in the INE is high compared with other political institutions. In September 2017, the most valued national institutions were the Army, 58%, and the Catholic Church, 57%. The INE had a 35% approval rating and scored better than the Supreme Court, Attorney General, trade unions, Electoral Tribunal, and the Presidency itself. In 2006, confidence in the institutions in the Institute was at 65%, dropping to 47% in 2010 and to 35% in 2017. The decline in confidence has been a parallel process to this disaffection with democracy that has been growing in recent years. How and when did the idea emerge of Russian tampering in Mexican elections? Some analysts and journalists have speculated that Russia might be trying to disrupt the region by heightening political polarization in Mexico. In November 2017, Shannon O'Neill of the Council of Foreign Relations warned against Russian meddling in the US elections, and in his article, "Don't Let Mexico's Elections Become Putin's Next Target," wrote, quote, "If Russia truly wants to damage the US and weaken the Western world order, Mexico elections offer a more rewarding and more vulnerable target." A month later, General McMaster, Trump's former national security advisors, confirmed O'Neill's warning. After bringing to mind other places, such as Catalonia in Spain, the UK, and France, McMaster focused on Mexico and said, "You see initial signs of it in the Mexican presidential campaign already." He added that the US government was concerned by Russia's use of advanced cyber tools to promote propaganda and disinformation. Later on, Rex Tillerson was asked about evidence of Russian elections interference. His advice was, pay attention to what's happening. But these accusations have not confirmed. There is scant evidence of Russian interference according to a variety of experts on Mexican politics, cybersecurity, and international security, both within and outside the country. The Mexican government has itself denied such claims, and Russia has done likewise. A senior official at Mexico's INE said the agency was on guard against any foreign interference. Quote, "We do think it is a possibility, and we are preparing our service so that it will not affect the process." The same opinion is shared by both the electoral justice system and the Mexican intelligence services. Clips of McMaster's comments went viral. Social media erupted with memes linking AMLO to Russian or Soviets. The candidate responded ironically, joking that he should be called Andres Manuelovich, and posting a video where he looks waiting for a Russian submarine to bring gold from Moscow. In this way, many Mexicans seem to have taken McMaster's accusation with a pinch of salt, because when they come from Uncle Sam, no statement can be trusted. Based on their strong nationalistic feelings, many Mexicans might even use warning about a Russian threat as a potential smoke screen for Washington's intention to interfere in the elections. Manuel Cosillo, a digital strategist, claims to have found Russian fingerprints on social media traffic concerning the election, much of it about AMLO. He found that 4.8 million items about AMLO had been posted on social media and news websites in the past month by users outside Mexico. Around 63% were associated with Russia and 20% with Ukraine. Similar searches for the other two candidates reveal that most of the foreign activities was from the US, with only 4% from Russia. Other digital consultants running different programs said they had found no such evidence of elections-related activity from Russia. AMLO is seen by some analysts as the Kremlin favorite, given the positive coverage he has received from Sputnik and RT. The Washington Post noted that RT had started giving vast amount of time to AMLO, main English language spokesman, and pointed out that the candidate said that spokesman's wife will join his cabinet if he wins. He quickly denied being a spokesman for AMLO and denounced the notion of Russian intervention in the election as fabricated fake news and pure fantasy. Regardless of who benefits from claiming there is a close connection, the spokesman links to RT and the AMLO's inner circle seem to be the only pieces of public evidence for any allegations about Russian support for the candidate. Other analysts argue that after the propaganda phase, a hypothetical effort to interfere might include a cyber hacking operation to sway Mexican elections in favor of one of the candidates or to cast doubt on the whole process. The INE is well respected, but according to an internal report cited by El Universal, a Mexican daily, the country's new electronic voting system allowing Mexicans to cast their ballots online from overseas may be vulnerable to outside manipulation of voting results. But actually, Mexicans living abroad must vote by postmail. Moreover, the report revealed that entities located in Russia are among the most frequent visitors to the site, despite the fact that there are few Mexican citizens residing there. The Institute has requested international assistance with observation missions to enhance the legitimacy of the results and is trying to work with Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to hamper the spread of fake news online. The Mexican authorities have also requested international assistance with electoral monitoring. AMLO's political rivals have long worked to depict him as a lefty populist in the style of Hugo Chavez and as a danger to democracy and stability. Rumors about Russia have begun to meld with such attacks. In any case, the discussion is more academic and based on assumptions rather than on actual evidence. What is true is that in Mexico, all political parties use social networks, including WhatsApp, for their own benefit and to discredit their rivals. Trolls, bots, and fake news are the order of the day, but they are not manipulated by foreigners or from abroad, but by national agents. What political parties and candidates do in the social media will be decisive. In the last presidential election, the ruling PAN faced accusations that it employed a legion of trolls. Since then, Mexico's online audience has almost doubled to around 71.3 million internet users, up from 40.9 million in 2012. At the same time, the campaigns have become more adept at designing online strategies. AMLO has been critical of NAFTA, just as Trump has been, and has presented himself as standing up for his people and country against a president many Mexicans consider an American bully. He has also talked about reworking energy reforms that open up the nation's oil markets to foreign companies. Therefore, the perception of Mexican is he is the candidate that will best defend the national interest. This, in a country as nationalistic as Mexico, is very important. The question of who would better defend Mexico from Trump in the event of becoming the country's president, posed in an April survey, was answered by 30% in favor of AMLO, by 23% in favor of Anaya, and by only 7% in favor of Mid. Russia has had a long but a superficial relationship with Mexico, and the two countries have not developed strong commercial or cultural ties. It is not obvious how AMLO's success would necessarily advance Russian goals in Mexico, if such goals were indeed to exist. For the full year 2016, Russia and Mexico had traded $1.7 billion. that is roughly equal to the value of goods that cross the US-Mexican border every 31 hours. With such a minuscule commercial relationship, there is little opportunity for bribes or payoffs. And for corrupt Russian elites, Mexico is not a growth market. Some Mexican political commentators have said that there is a little reason yet to fear Russian involvement in this election. The point is that Washington hasn't provided any solid proof for this. So far, it's just a speculation. Apart from simple sowing confusion, it's not immediately obvious what the Russians' fake news endgame in Mexico might be. Although an AMLO victory, assuming the Russians won, is likely to complicate US-Mexico relations, but it will not be a strategic setback. Finally, the highest electoral tribunal in Mexico, the superior chamber of the Electoral Court of the Federal Judicial Branch, is currently not evaluating any cases regarding the meddling of foreign powers such as Russia in the electoral process. However, there remains an important question. What would happen in Mexico if the government and the intelligence agency were to detect undue foreign meddling in the elections? But for the moment, that is far from being the case. Thank you.
That's nice. Okay, I apologize we've compressed the time for questions, but I hope that those comprehensive interventions were very helpful. So we'll move straight to questions. We need some microphones. We have one in the middle here. I'm looking for microphones. Perhaps over here.
Jonathan Isle from the Royal United Services Institute in London. I wonder if I could ask Mr. Moran in particular this question because it applies to chiefs of intelligence in other countries as well. In operational terms, what do you do if in the middle of an electoral campaign you discover that one candidate is being undermined in the way that we had from our French colleague? How do you maintain the integrity of your service while still sort of saying something in public if something needs to be said, the American problem, as it were? And more importantly, do you think that it's up to intelligence services to offer active protection for the cyber operations of candidates in an election in order to prevent phishing operations?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I think I have to take that, right? Or maybe they have volunteers. So first of all, I think there was a question, what will I do when I see, or when we see in a External Foreign Intelligence Service a hostile activity? First of all, we'll inform the service in another country. That's what we have to do. I think it doesn't make any sense till we wait until the next meeting takes place somewhere and then we approach our allies. I think it has to be a very operational activity to inform other country, and then it's up to the other country. What do they need to do? Whether there is a need for bilateral operation, we would be open for that. In case there is a need to do something in multilateral framework, there's also a possibility for that. But it's always, when it comes to intel information about political decision, we are collecting the information, we are passing it on to our allies, to our political masters, and it's up to them what to do with that information. So intelligence never should be in the lead when making a policy-related decisions. And the second part of the question you had was whether intelligence services should be in charge for protecting the candidates. My short answer is depending on the system. In our country, probably not. Probably it will be another institution that is dealing with malicious activity in unclassified networks. In some other country, it might be an intelligence service. So it fully depends on the country and the composition of powers.
And to yes, it's okay. To complete the answer, the French government gave to every candidate a formation session teaching how to protect your mails and etc. 3 months before the election, the campaign. So they consider that now it's their job.
Okay, thank you. Very similar in the UK, well, government, supposed political parties. Gentleman at the front row there.
Yes. I'm the ambassador of Italy here in Riga. And I have a question to Dr. Carlos Malamud concerning the fact that what he observes is happening in Mexican elections is probably also happening in other Latin American countries. I think this topic has been raised also at the OAS, the Organization of American States. For those who don't know what it is, basically all countries, all Latin American countries and North American countries belongs to it, except Cuba. So they've been debating about it. They have a pretty good system for observing and monitoring elections. They also observe the campaigns that are going on, etc. It's similar to the one in the OSCE system. So I'm wondering whether you don't think that the OAS could play a role. It has traditionally this role of harmonizing legislation, of introducing innovative legislation in this field, maybe enhance the monitoring activities of elections of the OAS. Yeah, that's a question that I have. Thank you.
Yes, but as happens with the European Union missions, electoral missions, the OIS electoral missions are acting by demand and by demand of the countries. Mexico, in this concrete case, has a very sophisticated electoral control system, so frequently they don't need a foreign observer, but they don't close the doors to it.
Okay, thank you. Lady in the second row here.
Thank you. My name is Liisa Past, and I'm the Chief Research Officer of the Cybersecurity Branch of the Estonian Information System Authority. So given that I've spent a large chunk of my past year both drawing up comprehensive risk assessment for the Estonian voting systems and elections, and I'm currently drafting voluntary guidelines that can be used across Europe under the auspices of the NIS Directives Cooperation Group, I have two rather practical questions. The first of them is, as Bob pointed out very eloquently, elections are a fundamentally national issue. No nation should ever tell another nation how to run its democracy, as long as the elections are free, fair, democratic. But the threat actor is so clear. So how do we cooperate without telling each other what to do? How do we manage to counter the same threat actor who clearly has a similar behavioral pattern? And my second question is that the risk scenarios are likely to be integrated. It's not just information operations, but it's ranging from fake video defacements, phishing attacks, to most likely compromising more visible candidates that can potentially have engaged in rather unsavory business in their past lives. What does resilience and deterrence look like in that world where the attack is so multifaceted?
Okay.
Small questions.
Oh, yeah. Small questions, yeah.
Who wants to lead off on that?
Well, you can
Oh no, you lead off. Go on, go on.
You. You say that you have exchange with your colleagues coming from other countries, for instance. So you exchange your experiences.
Well, I think it's a good challenge. We have to learn from each other, don't we? And well, by conferences like this is how, isn't it? And if the premise is that no one organisation or body has the answers, we have to work together. So that's where I come from, and that has to be international these days. Actually, I've got a question I want to throw open to the audience, because I'm not sure it's a fair question to the panel. My question is this, and I was thinking about this morning. My question is, has the process of democracy been overtaken by the possibilities of technology? Who's brave enough to answer that? No one, maybe. Is that too difficult a question? But I think it illustrates the point, about different disciplines working together to find the solutions. And I was very taken by Mick's point about Russian influence and how it's not just at or before elections. It's all the time. It's well in advance. And probably all in our nations, we predicate it on regulation, and the rules is something we don't think about to the lead up to elections. But it feels that maybe we shall have to constantly think about vigilance year-round, all the time. Carlos.
Oh, yes, if cooperation is very difficult in the Western countries, in Latin America is a more complicated task because the concept of no intervention in the internal affairs of each country is very, very strong. So any government try to set any word against or related to what happens in those countries. But the problem is how you deal with national problems, national issues that are elections or politics, and at the same time with global problems as is social media. National elections are held in national countries. Social media could happen in any place, and in fact, in the Catalan referendum, you have a lot of bots and trolls operating from Venezuela, Russia, and any places. So on the one hand, you have local problems, and on the other hand, global problems with no tools to counter-attack or respond to these ones.
And sorry, yes, no?
No.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, it's okay? Yes. For resilience, I am a little bit optimistic because we observe that, for instance, for Macron leaks, but it's not the only case. We observe that citizens, internet users, are very, very reactive. And only 2 or 3 hours after the publication of the revelation of the fake news, they began to connect themselves, to exchange some information about data and try to publish immediately some very first reaction about what looks like fails, okay? And more and more, it's more and more precise after 1 day or 2 days only. So if you want to be well informed, if you want to have the right news about a fake news, it's possible very quickly now, because during electoral campaigns, a lot of internet users think it's very important, so we have to mobilize our energy against fake news. So I am optimistic on this part. For the example of bill, it's a real problem, of course, but I think there is something interesting with the idea to make a bill against fake news. Is a symbolic law, okay, symbolic bill, because it's a way to say, okay, we were living on a worldwide, very wide web, okay, and now open bar is closed. It's not possible to consider that, okay, everything is open and we can come in with fake news, with propaganda, etc., on social media without any risk. Now we try to say that you, fake news makers, you are risky. Okay, you have a risk. So it's not perfect, but I think it's the very first step to say open bar now is closed?
I will also add a few words since the question came from Estonia, so I have to answer. So first of all, I think key is to share information, to learn from each other. That's what we do in intelligence world, and that's what you have to do in your respective organization, because I know that we very closely look what's happening in Latvia, what's happening in Sweden and other countries where elections are coming, because as I said in my remarks, what happens in other countries probably might happen in our country. So we have to take good note of on that. And I think it's very important also to concentrate on messaging and to concentrate on deterrence. The French case, I think that French President Macron was very bold when he had a press conference with Vladimir Putin, and he said it out loud that RT and Sputnik are part of Russia's propaganda machine, and they should not dwell into the politics of the election system of France. That's exactly what I mean. You have to kind of all out say it. You're guilty. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another question, gentleman at the front over here.
And there is another one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking about what you said. Should I talk about? Yeah. So my name is Sebastian Bay. I'm a senior expert with STRATCOM COE, and I've met you, Bob, last year when we were preparing for election preparations in Sweden.
Yes.
I was contemplating what you said about digital change challenging democracies? And one of the most interesting episodes when it comes to challenging the legitimacy of elections took place in Kenya last year during the presidential elections. I don't know how many of you that followed it closely, but one of the most persistent rumors that challenged the credibility of elections was a rumor that there was a constant 13% margin between the candidates that was induced because the system for tabulating votes was hacked. And to support this, there was an error log for a system released. And the election management body tried to defend this on air live with experts going through the error logs line by line. And that is a very interesting thing. When we start defending elections and the credibility in this democratic process by having programmers do a line-by-line assessment of error code. So it comes back to you again to some extent, that how do we work with this when the essence are in many cases digital systems, either if we do digital voting or digital tabulation, but trust in these systems are so inherently difficult to maintain and defend because so very few people can look at a piece of error code and says, yes, this was manipulated or not. And how do we work with that? And that's a question for Estonia, who has a high level of digitalization. How do we defend trust in digital systems? And also maybe to you, Bob, if you've reasoned around this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perhaps I'll lead off. I mean, thinking about trust in digital systems, and I was thinking of electronic counting in particular, it takes my mind back to the referendum in Scotland in 2014 on independence. That was counting there was manual, hand counting. There was thought to given to electronic counting for that referendum because it was a big event, and electronic counting happens in certain other Scottish elections, so it was very doable. But the view was taken for a confidence aspect that it should be manually counted. So those were large count centres across Scotland. The Russian observers who came along rather ironically criticised that and said, oh, well, this is all just so many things being counted by hand, it can't be right, these big centres, no one knows what's going on, should have been done electronically, and put that out over social media and got pick up on that, which was part of the destabilising of legitimacy in that result. Other people retweeted, and if they didn't, they want independence, they didn't get independence, they picked that up, and so it's not an easy answer. There is a certain comfort in traditional paper bits of paper ballot papers and so forth, and manual approaches, but equally for generations coming through, clearly that's not going to be acceptable. So we're having to move with the times, and it's a challenge. I don't know if anyone wants to add to that.
Yes. Sorry, yeah. I want to highlight a specific point about digital. The problem of metrics on social media. And I connected the problem of metrics with all what we have heard tomorrow about cognitive bias, for instance. And I think that if you want to debunk fake news or rumors on the message, it's not enough. It's not enough because of cognitive bias. And because of the fact that some people think that it's right or it's worth, because metrics prove that it's very shared, is very liked. So they have the metrics to obtain the social proof, okay, what we spoke about. And so I think that something very important in this case, for instance, it's not only to speak about the message, but to speak about the way the fake news are disseminated. And this is the reason why I think that fact-checking is important, but path-checking is more important. Because if you are able to prove that this message is connected with a lot of bots, a lot of false accounts, etc., I think it will be easier to prove to a certain person that there is a problem and that digital metrics on social media are not proof.
Okay, I think the gentleman towards the back. We've got time for one more question. Did you have a question, sir? Do you need a microphone? Just get a microphone to you. On the way. There we are.
Yes, Vegos Polic, I'm MP here in Latvian Parliament. I have a question to Mick Moran and maybe others want to add to this as well, because listening to Arnaud's presentation on the French elections and knowing what we do in the Baltic states with Stop Fake, Propastop and elves who are doing it on NGO level or civic society level. At the same time, it seems that all over the democracies of the West, there is no really the government intervention, so to say. So therefore, for example, last year in Latvia, we had local elections where same as it was in US elections and in a Brexit campaign, the winner party in a local election in Riga used the same methods which were not prohibited by law. Now we know it's a different ball game. So therefore my question to Mick is, for example, if we see like the case with Le Soir, where actually if you're not a specialist you really cannot discover it, so you have to be the local internet provider or the intelligence community member. What is the way? Shouldn't be there more intelligence community involvement and regardless of political party membership, that actually there is a decision that we stop certain sites? Or for example, there was a big outcry in Latvia when our Corruption Prevention Bureau had announced that
we're almost out of time, sir. What should we let Mick answer? Yep.
Yeah.
We're absolutely almost out of time.
Yes, got the question. But I would like to answer to the previous question, since Estonia was mentioned, and now I'm speaking as a citizen of Estonia. I think the solution is to do the election process fully online, heavily protected, fully online. In that case, you don't have any problem with counting because it's in there. Veiko's question, I think again, like I said before, intelligence services provide information, and then it's a political decision what to do. Sorry.
Okay, to the point.
One part of the answer is also that we are all responsible. And for instance, Le Soir, on my example, is responsible because Le Soir didn't buy the domain name .info, .info. It's a mistake. It's a fault.
Okay. I'll put it, if I may.
They didn't protect.
I'm going to cut the debate off. We had extra. Organisers kindly gave us an extra 5 minutes. We're into the last 3 seconds now. Can I just say thank you, everyone? I'm not sure we answered all the questions, but I hope it was really helpful to hear the case studies. I hope it's taken the debate forward. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Bob, for this. Okay, I'm not This is a terrifically interesting subject, and this is going to be continued, because I'm not cutting the conversation short here. I mean, we're just taking a break, and the conversation actually will be continued, because I mean, one of the objectives of the organizers for this event was precisely to give you the opportunity to explore those questions in more detail, and to bring the discussion to the direction you want it to bring and become involved in the conversation, and that applies to basically all of you. So what we will do after the coffee break, basically we will continue the conversation we started here into the separate parallel sessions, and there will be 3 separate sessions. We termed the title of the first parallel session is Electoral Ethics Between Transparency and Trust. That will take place in conference room A. Arnaud is going to be there as well, and his conversation partner is going to be Edward Lucas. Edward, you're right there. Can we bring your microphone to you in a couple of sentences? Is there a microphone over there, please? Yes. Edward, this direction here. Yes. So, judging from what we heard on this panel, and judging what you heard from Arnaud, where do you think you will, and judging from the title of your panel, Electoral Ethics, where do you think you could bring this conversation, expand it in which direction?
Well, I think I want to look a lot more at the details of how we give the voters the information they need to make their minds up. I'm very nervous about courts and about politicians deciding about political speech, but I think we can do a much better job on labeling information and giving people the sort of basic tools they need to see, is this coming from real Le Soir or fake Le Soir. If you want to know more about that, please come to our session. It's going to be absolutely fascinating.
All right. Conference room A, Arnaud and Edward is going to lead that discussion, but please do get involved in that discussion. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. So session 2, conference room B, Bob is going to join that conversation as well, and Juliet Schmidt is going to join there as well. Could we pass the microphone over here to Juliet? Juliet is senior conflict and security elections and political processes specialist, independent consulting. Well, pitch your one. I mean, otherwise everyone will go to Edwards and Arnaud's session, and you'll be just the 2 of you in that session. So you need to sell this.
Bob and I are going to talk about, very briefly, the legal challenges around botnets and elections, and particularly political campaigning. And we're both practitioners in the field, and so we're looking forward to a really interesting discussion about the practical solutions.
All right, great. So that's your conference room B conversation topic. And conference room C, and by the way, let me pitch that one myself. That is going to be on the 11th floor, so you get a good view of the town as well, of the city. I'm sorry, as well. And the conversation there is going to be led by Ingrid Bețu. She's from the Electoral Authority of Romania, and Jonas Survila, who is an independent expert on political communications from King's College London. Jonas, are you here somewhere? Yeah. Jonas, yes, please. I didn't see Ingrid, but Jonas, yes.
It's hard to get your attention when you separate your audience from dinner. But what's on our menu, or what's on our offer on our menu, it's 3 + 2. 3 keywords: intelligence agencies, election commissions, and debunking of disinformation. Of course, within the realm of campaigning, plus 2 experienced practitioners of the field with government, intelligence, and campaigning experience.
Right.
So please join us.
Cheers. Okay, 11th floor, good view. Okay, right. So that's the menu, not for the dinner, but for the sessions that we still have going on. Okay, all right. So we break for coffee now. Those parallel sessions are going to start 6:15, as the agenda here says. Just 1 more minute, please. I will not see you after the sessions, so I will just tell you what's going on afterwards. So shuttle buses outside are going to, after the sessions are done, you come down here, right through that door, and the shuttle buses will take you to the old city, to the small guild, where there is going to be the opening dinner. So follow the signs or the staff members if you get lost. Don't spend the night in the library, because the wine and the dinner is going to be served in the old town, not here. Okay? And tomorrow we begin at 10. Hope to see you back tomorrow, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.